So I've done a lot of videos recently about narcissists and narcissism in general. I can neither confirm nor deny that that is tied to an increase in interactions I've had to have with my ex. Can't say that. No, not on YouTube. But in today's video, I want to explore the concept of moving on and how to find a healthy relationship after you've had a bad breakup with a narcissist. And let's be honest, you're never going to have a good breakup with a true narcissist. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. So let's assume, for the purposes of this video, that you were in a relationship with someone with full-fledged narcissistic personality disorder, NPD for short, since that is a little bit of a tongue twister, or someone with at least really strong narcissistic tendencies and traits, not someone who's just occasionally a little selfish, a little oblivious, lacking empathy, that kind of thing. A full-fledged narcissist. So how does narcissistic abuse, and that's what you've been putting up with if you were in a relationship with a narcissist, how does narcissistic abuse affect future relationships that you will eventually have? So when you get dumped by a narcissist, and most of the time it is them dumping you because they've grown bored with you, or maybe they've found what they call a new source of supply, narcissistic supply. Most of the time it is you that got dumped, but maybe you wised up and you dumped them, recognizing that it wasn't healthy. And if you did that, kudos to you for recognizing that and being able to take assertive action. But most of the time, in the wake of a bad breakup with a narcissist, we go through emotional detachment. What do I mean by that? I mean that we just kind of like detach our emotions. We're almost emotionally unavailable, at least for a time being. We don't really want to feel what we're feeling, so we just kind of go through life as an emotionless zombie. We're not really feeling anything. We're not allowing things to affect our feelings. And ultimately, that's not really healthy. It's not where we want to stay, but it is often where we end up after the end of a narcissistic relationship. But we also have trust issues. After all, a true narcissist probably made you think that you were the crazy one. Maybe they gaslit you. Maybe they manipulated you. Maybe they made you feel like you were the bad guy all the time they were really the bad guy. So it creates trust issues. We don't know which way is up really, and we don't know who to trust. And we thought we loved this person. We thought they loved us. And for a time, maybe even a long time, the relationship was great. And now we're just kind of left holding the bag, wondering what the hell happened. So we do tend to not trust anyone in the wake of a narcissistic breakup. Then we're insecure, and maybe even we feel inadequate. Maybe we feel like we weren't good enough. And maybe if we'd been better, maybe they would have stayed. Maybe they would have wanted to be in a relationship with us if we could have just been a little bit better. So we end up being insecure, our self-esteem is plummeting, and we just feel inadequate. And those feelings permeate throughout our entire existence. They don't go away once the relationship ends. And we're just kind of left with all these unanswered questions. And chances are you probably tried to have rational conversation with the narcissist, and guess what? That does not work at all. But you probably tried to have rational conversations with them and get answers to questions. And maybe you even did that after the breakup, trying to get some quote unquote closure. Guess what? That is not going to work with a true narcissist. You're just wasting your time and you're risking them reeling you back in. What are typical behaviors of narcissist survivors? Well, I alluded to some in that first section, but depression really can come on strong, especially if you were prone to it already. Thankfully, I am not typically prone to depression, and I do typically find ways to deal with that. But depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, which I did mention, you might even feel shame, maybe ashamed that you were with a narcissist and that you could fall victim to a narcissist, that you weren't smart enough to see it coming, that kind of thing. But you may also feel flashbacks. Something may trigger you. It could be a song. It could be going to a place, maybe a favorite restaurant, maybe a favorite vacation destination, a TV show that you both watched together and loved. There are all kinds of things that can come on strong and trigger these emotional flashbacks. And maybe you even remember the good times with the narcissist, and it makes you miss them, maybe even makes you question whether breaking up with them was the right thing. But overwhelmingly, most people in the wake of a breakup with a narcissist just feel overwhelmingly sad. They feel helpless and they feel worthless. So how long does it take to heal your brain from narcissistic abuse once the relationship is ended? Of course, like all breakups, it depends on how long the relationship lasted. If you were in one for years and years and years, I was married for almost 16 years to my now ex-wife. If you were married for a long time, that can take a really long time, especially if there was narcissistic abuse throughout the relationship. However, I will point out that a lot of the time, the narcissist love bombs you and they just overwhelm you with positive feelings at the outset because they desperately want to reel you in and get you hooked and get you craving and addicted to what they have to offer. So it's not usually bad the entire time. And in fact, anytime it starts to get bad, you might start to wise up and might start to pull away. They sense that and then they start that love bombing all over again. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So it's very rare that it's just bad for years and years and years. But how long it takes you to heal will very much depend upon how long the relationship was and how long the bad parts were before you or they called it quits. It also depends on the level of the abuse that you suffered. Of course, there are a lot of varying degrees. There are people with just mild narcissistic tendencies and traits, and then there is full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. And again, that's referred to as NPD most of the time. And there's a lot of criteria that go into diagnosing somebody with NPD. I'm not qualified to diagnose somebody with NPD. Chances are you aren't either. I do have another video, though, where I cover exactly what is needed to officially diagnose someone with NPD. And if you want to watch that, if you want to see what those signals are, because there is a range, but then there are also several different ones, and they have to meet a certain number of those in order to be diagnosed with NPD. If you want to see that video, check it out right up here. There'll be a little card for it up there in the screen. You can check that out and watch that right here on my channel. So of course, I've told you that it varies, and I know that's not really an answer you want to hear. So let's just go with a few basic assumptions. Let's assume the relationship lasted at least a year and that it was fairly traumatic. They either have full-blown NPD or really strong narcissistic tendencies and traits, and there was a lot of emotional abuse involved. Let's just assume those things right there. In those cases, I would expect it to take at least a year, maybe even 2 years before you really are in a healthy mental state. And there are several things that you're going to need to do in order to get there. I'm going to cover those a little bit later in the video. But in extreme cases, it might take several years, but your willingness to dive in and do the work is going to have a dramatic impact on that. Real quick, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that like button for me. It sends a great signal to YouTube. They show my videos to more people just like you, helps me grow my channel, and it's a great way to say thank you to me for taking the time to make these videos. Do you ever fully recover from narcissistic abuse? And the short answer is yes. It would be very rare for you to never recover, and you would pretty much have to not do any of the work involved in order to facilitate that healing. So as long as you're willing to do the work, and as long as you're aware of the issue and you're not going back to them, you're not jumping into a relationship with another narcissist, and you're not jumping into another relationship with anyone too quickly before you've had time to heal, you can definitely heal. So the first thing I would recommend is to get with a qualified therapist. And there's lots of different types of therapy out there. Cognitive behavioral therapy, usually referred to as CBT, there's DBT, there's EMDR, there's all kinds of therapists out there and different types of therapy. And you just want to find one that resonates with you. And it may take 2 or 3 different therapists before you find the right person and the right style, but I would absolutely do that right away. So we've talked about how long it takes. We've talked about what it does to your brain to suffer narcissistic abuse, but let's talk about what actually happens in the brain during a narcissistic abuse cycle. So long-term abuse actually can change a victim's brain. There are several studies that talk about this. And speaking of studies and sources, because I am not a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, I'm going to link to all of my different scientific and medical sources down below in the description so you can see exactly where I'm getting all of my claims. But it actually does change the victim's brain if they've suffered that narcissistic abuse cycle for a long time. You see cognitive decline in people who suffered narcissistic abuse. Memory loss is another thing that comes from a result of narcissistic abuse. Chronic stress tends to come on, and then you ultimately will start to see symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, not unlike what happens with soldiers who come back to the US or wherever they're from the battlefield, who suffered all kinds of horrific things when they were out there fighting the fight. So you will start to see all of those things if you suffered narcissistic abuse, especially really traumatic abuse over a long period of time. But the good news is, again, with a qualified therapist, you can begin to work through those things and not let it dominate your life. You're never going to forget the abuse that you suffered, and you're never going to forget the narcissist. But you can get to a place where those things and their actions in the past don't affect you in the present and your future. So how do you regain your sense of self in the wake of narcissistic abuse? And again, this is assuming that the relationship is totally done and you're totally out of contact with this person. The first is to surround yourself with good, supportive people. And one of the things that may come up is there may be mutual friends that you both have who are still friends with both of you. And I want to caution you, because those people might be narcissists themselves, or they might be narcissistic abuse victims. So I want to caution you. I want to set some clear boundaries with these people. You don't want to hear about the narcissist from them, and you don't want them to discuss anything about you with the narcissist. And if you suspect they can't or won't do that, you need to cut that friendship off completely, just like the narcissist. Surround yourself with good, quality, wholesome people. Remember, Jim Rome, this is sometimes attributed to Aristotle, said something along the lines of, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you spend most of your time with people with addiction issues or mental health issues, behavioral problems, behavioral challenges, if you spend most of your time with people like that, guess what? You're going to have those same issues too. Whereas if you spend your time with people who are wholesome, who are good, who lift people up, not just you, but other people as well. I'm not talking about people who are perfect. Nobody's perfect. And I'm not talking about people who never make mistakes. I'm not even talking about people who don't do anything substance-wise occasionally to enjoy it. I am talking about people with a positive mindset, a growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset, who make you feel better about yourself. So spend time with people like that and avoid people who bring you down. The next is do something that the narcissist always said you couldn't do. That could be a fitness challenge. Maybe you've always been a little bit overweight. Guess what? Go out there and prove them wrong. Lose that weight right now, or build that muscle right now. Do something that they said you couldn't do that you know you can do if you put your mind to it. Don't try and move too quickly. And that goes for relationships as well as just friendships. You've been through a lot, so it's okay to take things slowly and slowly begin to acclimate back into normal life. And then it goes without saying that with regards to the narcissist, unless you have kids together or something like that, I absolutely want you to block them on your phone, block them on social media, block them on email, pretend they don't exist, and eliminate any of the ways for them to contact you. If you happen to work together, I would absolutely look for a new job, because you can't do anything about making them look for a new job. You can only control yourself. So I would absolutely remove yourself from that situation as quickly as you can and eliminate any ways that they can contact you outside of the workplace. So how do you know that you're ready to date again after the end of this narcissistic relationship? That's ultimately what a lot of people want to know. And I did talk about some time frames earlier, but of course, every situation is different. So you may not need a year, which is what I mentioned earlier. You might need 5 years. I don't know. I don't know your situation. But there are some clear signs that you can look for in your life that let you know when you're ready. So the first one is you have to feel completely over them. They no longer have any power over you. If you accidentally run into them at a restaurant, it doesn't create any emotional response or trigger in you, either positive or negative. You basically want to see them the way you would an old coworker or something like that. You don't want to have any emotional response to them. You don't want to feel anger. You don't want to feel sadness. You don't want to feel hurt. You don't want to feel elation and excitement. You don't want to feel sexual attraction. You basically want to feel completely indifferent about them. If you see them on social media, if you run into them in person, whatever. And if you do feel those feelings, then you're probably not ready yet to get out there and get back on the horse and start dating again. At least not any serious dating. If you want to date casually, casually, have the occasional hookup just for that kind of release, that's one thing. Do not enter a full-fledged relationship until you are well on your way to being healed and the narcissist no longer has any control over you. If there is a possibility that this person could be capable of being in a healthy relationship, and by definition, that means they don't have NPD, they just have narcissistic tendencies and traits, and you think maybe it would work if you could do things differently, or if they could do things differently, or if the two of you could come together and do things differently. If you think there's a chance for that, I do have a video that walks you through how to get back together again with a narcissistic ex. So if you're in that boat, check that video out right up here. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.